The house was silent except for the awkward shuffling of guests who had expected a glamorous Christmas Eve banquet. Instead of silver trays filled with roasted turkey, glazed ham, and delicate desserts, there were only empty tables and untouched plates. My daughter-in-law stood frozen in the living room, her forced smile trembling as whispers spread among the 25 people she had bragged about. Hosting. One of the neighbors leaned in and whispered just loud enough for others to hear. Didn't she promise a grand feast prepared by her mother-in-law? What happened? All eyes turned toward her, waiting for an explanation. She stammered, her voice cracking under the weight of humiliation. And then came the worst part. The very people she wanted to impress, our neighbors and community leaders, pieced together the truth. Her entire scheme had been built on lies. While she burned in shame that night, I was miles away, resting peacefully, having finally chosen dignity over servitude. But let me take you back to the beginning, so you understand how years of silence and sacrifice led to this Christmas that no one in town would ever forget. The first time I met Vanessa, she was wearing a diamond engagement ring that sparkled almost as brightly as her smile. My son Michael beamed with pride as he introduced us at Rosie's Diner, our town's most beloved breakfast spot. I remember wrapping my arms around her, feeling her stiff, perfunctory response to my embrace. "Mom, this is the woman I'm going to marry," Michael had said, his eyes gleaming with the kind of love that blinds you to red flags. I nodded, pushing down the knot in my throat. Something in her smile didn't reach her eyes when she looked at me. A subtle dismissal I would come to know all too well. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Coleman," she said, her voice honeyed with politeness that would melt away once Michael wasn't looking. "Michael has told me so much about your quaint little life here." The way she emphasized quaint made my modest existence sound like something pitiful, but I swallowed my pride. For Michael, I would try. God knows, I'd swallowed worse for his sake. Our modest 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street had been home for nearly 30 years. After Richard died of a heart attack when Michael was only 12, I'd worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse to keep us afloat. Those years were a blur of uniforms, overtime, and falling asleep while helping Michael with his homework. But we survived. I put him through college, watched him graduate, and sent him off to build his life in the city. I never expected him to return to our small town, but when the local hospital offered him a position as a physician, he surprised me by accepting. "It's time to come home, Mom," he had said. "Besides, Vanessa thinks it's charming here." What I didn't realize then was that charming to Vanessa meant opportunities to climb the social ladder in a small pond. 3 months after their wedding, they moved in with me temporarily while looking for their dream home. That temporary arrangement stretched into 2 years. Not that I minded having Michael close. After raising him alone, having my son back was a gift. But Vanessa made it clear from the beginning that my home was now her domain. "We should really update this kitchen," she declared one morning, eyeing my well-loved but dated cabinets. "If we're going to host the hospital board dinner here next month, everything needs to look perfect." "Host the board dinner?" I asked, surprised. "Here?" She flashed that tight smile. "Of course. Michael thinks it would be wonderful for his colleagues to experience your famous pot roast. You don't mind, do you?" Before I could answer, she added, "I've already sent out the invitations. 12 people. Nothing you can't handle." That was the first of many events I would host without being consulted. Birthdays, anniversaries, hospital functions. I became the invisible hand that made Vanessa look like the perfect hostess. I cooked, cleaned, and stayed up late polishing silver that had been my grandmother's, while she took credit for everything. My mother-in-law loves doing this stuff, she'd tell guests when they complimented the food or decorations. "Keeps her busy, you know, at her age. What else would she do with her time?" Each comment was a small cut, but I bandaged my wounded pride in silence. Michael was building his career, making connections. I told myself it was a small price to pay for his happiness. On a crisp autumn evening last year, while I was washing dishes after hosting a dinner for Michael's birthday, I overheard Vanessa talking to her friend in the living room. Living with his mother actually turned out to be perfect, she laughed, her voice lowered but still audible over the running water. "Free childcare once we have kids, free housekeeping, and she makes me look good to everyone who matters in this town. Plus, it's her house, but I've redecorated everything except her bedroom. Michael doesn't even notice she's being pushed into a smaller and smaller corner of her own life." Her friend giggled. "You're so smart, Vanessa. Does she ever complain?" "Are you kidding? She's from that generation of women who think suffering in silence is some kind of virtue. She'll never say a word. The plate I was washing slipped from my hands, cracking against the sink. I quickly turned off the water, hoping they hadn't heard. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the counter. Was that how they saw me? A doormat? A relic from a generation of silent sufferers? That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in years. My hair had grayed completely, and fine lines framed my eyes and mouth. When had I gotten so old? When had I started to disappear? I thought about my late husband, Richard, how he would react if he could see what had become of me. "Margaret," he would say, "where's that fire I fell in love with?" The truth was, I had banked that fire to keep peace, to make sure Michael never had to choose between his wife and his mother. I convinced myself it was noble, this self-erasure. But hearing Vanessa's words, I realized there was nothing noble about allowing yourself to be exploited. Still, I said nothing. I smiled through Thanksgiving as Vanessa paraded 20 guests through my home, introducing me as Michael's mom who helps around the house. I nodded when she announced we would host Christmas Eve dinner for her new friends from the country club. I pretended not to notice when she replaced my family photos with her modern art prints. The fire I had banked for so long wasn't dead, though. It was smoldering, waiting for the right moment to reignite. And that moment came exactly 1 week before Christmas, when Vanessa crossed a line I couldn't ignore. December in our town is like stepping into a Hallmark movie. Main Street glitters with white lights, shop windows display miniature winter wonderlands, and the town square boasts a 30-foot Christmas tree that brings children and adults alike to a standstill. It's magical, wholesome, and exactly the kind of backdrop Vanessa wanted for her social aspirations. That morning, I was baking Christmas cookies from my mother's recipe, the same gingerbread men Michael had loved since childhood. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with cinnamon and cloves. For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine sense of peace. Christmas had always been my favorite holiday, a time when I could almost feel Richard's presence, as if he were just in the next room, about to walk in with an armload of poorly wrapped presents. Vanessa swept into the kitchen wearing her designer workout clothes, though I'd never actually seen her exercise. Her hair was pulled back into a perfect ponytail, not a strand out of place. She grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator and leaned against the counter, watching me with calculating eyes. "So," she began casually, scrolling through her phone, "I've finalized the guest list for Christmas Eve." I continued rolling out dough. "That's nice. How many are we expecting? The usual family members?" She laughed, that short, dismissive laugh that always made me feel foolish. "Family? No, Margaret. This is important. I've invited the mayor and his wife, the new hospital administrator, and his husband, Dr. Richardson, and his daughter. You know, the one who just started that successful wellness clinic, plus some key people from the country club." I set down my rolling pin, flour dusting my apron. "How many people, Vanessa?" "Only 25, she replied, as if it were nothing. "I would have invited more, but I wanted it to feel intimate." 25 people? For Christmas Eve? My voice sounded small even to my own ears. "Yes," she said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "And I need you to pull out all the stops. Everyone knows about your cooking, and I've built up expectations. The prime rib needs to be perfect. None of that dry roast you made last year. And we'll need at least 6 dessert options. Oh, and could you use the good china? The set with the gold trim, not your everyday dishes." I stared at her, my hands covered in flour and sticky dough. "Vanessa, that's a lot to ask. Christmas Eve is just a week away, and I had planned—" "Planned what?" she interrupted, looking up from her phone with a raised eyebrow. "It's not like you have other commitments. Besides, Michael already told everyone at work that we're hosting. It's important for his career." She pushed herself away from the counter and patted my shoulder, leaving a faint smudge on her perfectly manicured hand that she quickly wiped on a nearby towel with a grimace of disgust. "You'll manage. You always do," she said with that plastic smile. "Just think of it as your Christmas gift to us." Before I could respond, she was gone, the echo of her designer boots clicking down the hallway. I stood alone in my kitchen, the kitchen where I had taught Michael to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, where I had cried into dish towels on the anniversaries of Richard's death, where I had built a life for myself and my son through sheer force of will. And now, it had become just another stage for Vanessa's social performances. Later that afternoon, while shopping for groceries at Wilson's Market, I overheard Vanessa's voice from the next aisle. Curiosity made me pause, my hand hovering over a display of cranberries. "Yes, it's going to be amazing," she was saying to someone. My mother-in-law is handling everything. The woman lives to cook and clean, I swear. It's like having a live-in. Caterer without the bill! Laughter followed, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. Between us, Vanessa continued, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper that was still perfectly audible. I think she's grateful we moved in. Gave her a purpose, you know. Before us, she was just rattling around that house alone. Now she gets to be useful. You're so generous, another woman responded. I recognized the voice. Sarah Jenkins, the bank manager's wife and a prominent member of the town's social circle. Most people would find it a burden to live with their mother-in-law. Well, it has its benefits, Vanessa replied, especially when they're as compliant as Margaret. I abandoned my shopping cart right there in the aisle and walked out of the store, the automatic doors whooshing behind me like an exhale of relief. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, feeling something inside me shift. Compliant. Useful. Live-in caterer. Was that all I had become? That evening, Michael came home late from his shift at the hospital. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea grown cold in front of me when he walked in. He looked tired. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from 12 hours of making life-or-death decisions. For a moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who needed me to be strong, to create safety in an unsafe world. Mom? Why are you sitting in the dark? He flipped on the light and squinted at me. Are you okay? Michael, I said quietly. We need to talk about Christmas Eve. He sighed, dropping his bag on the floor and loosening his tie. Vanessa told me she spoke with you. Look, I know it's a lot, but it's important for us. For my position at the hospital. 25 people, Michael. Without asking me first. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. I know it's last minute, but you always pull off these miracles. Remember my Medi? School graduation party? 30 people with 2 days' notice, and it was perfect. That was different, I said. That was for you. This is Vanessa using me as her personal chef and maid to impress people who don't even care about us. His expression hardened slightly. Mom, don't start this again. Vanessa is my wife. She's family now. And what am I? The words escaped before I could. Stop them. You're my mother. I love you. But I need you to support us in this. Please, just do it for peace. For me. For peace. For him. How many times had I swallowed my dignity for those reasons? I looked at my son, this man I had raised alone, poured my life into, sacrificed everything for, and I made a decision. All right, Michael, I said, rising from the table. I understand. Relief washed over his face as he hugged me. Thanks, Mom, you're the best. But as he walked away, he didn't see the resolve hardening in my eyes. He didn't know that this time, understanding didn't mean compliance. This Christmas, I was giving myself a gift that was long overdue. Self-respect. The week before Christmas unfolded with a frantic energy that consumed our household. Vanessa spent her days making phone calls, ordering expensive decorations, and dropping not-so-subtle hints about my cooking. The Richardsons are used to five-star restaurants, she reminded me over breakfast. And Mayor Wilson's wife mentioned they had Christmas in Aspen last year. We need to impress. I nodded and smiled. The perfect picture of motherly compliance. Meanwhile, I made lists, planned menus, and began preliminary preparations, all while harboring my secret plan. On Tuesday, I visited my oldest friend, Eleanor, who lived on the other side of town in a cozy apartment overlooking the park. We had been friends since high school, weathering marriages, children, and widowhood together. If anyone would understand, it would be her. You want to what? Eleanor's eyes widened as I explained my plan over tea in her sunlit kitchen. I want to leave on Christmas Eve morning, I repeated, before anyone wakes up, and I want to stay here with you, if that's all right. Eleanor set down her teacup with a decisive clink. Margaret Coleman, in the 40 years I've known you, this is the first truly selfish thing I've ever heard you consider doing. A slow smile spread across her face. It's about damn time. Relief flooded through me. So you don't think I'm being petty or vindictive? Petty? Vindictive? Eleanor scoffed. That daughter-in-law of yours has been treating you like an unpaid servant in your own home for 2 years. If anything, you're being too gentle. I don't want to hurt Michael, I said softly. But I can't keep disappearing like this, Elle. I'm fading away a little more each day. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were gnarled with arthritis, but still strong. Maggie, remember what you told me after Richard died? When I came over every day for a month because I couldn't bear to see you suffering alone? I smiled faintly. That friendship isn't just about being there for the celebrations. It's about showing up for the hard parts too. Exactly. My guest room is yours for as long as you need it, and I make a mean Christmas Eve hot chocolate with peppermint schnapps. As I drove home, a weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I had made a choice purely for myself. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The next few days, I played my role perfectly. I marinated meats, chopped vegetables, polished silver and ironed tablecloths. Vanessa floated around the house in a cloud of expensive perfume, occasionally stopping to inspect my work with critical eyes. The centerpiece should be higher, she instructed, and make sure the glasses are spotless. Dr. Richardson's wife used to work in hospitality. She notices everything. Of course, I replied mildly. I'll take care of it. Michael was rarely home, working extra shifts to have Christmas Eve off. When he did appear, he looked increasingly stressed, caught between hospital demands and Vanessa's perfectionism. Once, I caught him staring at our old family photo, the three of us at the beach, Richard with his arm around me, Michael between us building a sand castle. A lifetime ago. Everything okay? I asked. He startled. Yeah, just remembering Dad. He would have loved Christmas here. I smiled sadly. He would have been in the kitchen stealing cookie dough and getting underfoot. Michael laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard in months. Remember how he always insisted on hanging the lights himself, even though he was terrified of heights? And he'd make the same bad joke every year about being the star on top of the ladder. For a moment, we were connected again, mother and son, sharing the ghost of the man we had both loved. But then Vanessa called from upstairs. Something about the guest towels not being fluffy enough, and the moment shattered. I should go help, Michael said with a sigh. I watched him trudge upstairs, shoulders slightly stooped. When had my confident, bright-eyed boy become this, conflict-avoidant man? Had I done that to him by showing him that love meant endless sacrifice? On December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve, I baked 12 dozen cookies, prepared dough for fresh rolls, and chopped enough vegetables to feed a small army. Everything was labeled, organized, and ready for final preparation. To anyone watching, I was the dutiful mother-in-law, preparing for the grand feast. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I quietly packed a small suitcase. Just enough clothes for a few days, my medications, and the photo album of Michael growing up. I added the Christmas presents I had bought for him months ago and a card explaining my absence. Not apologizing. I was done with apologies, but explaining. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and slept fitfully, waking several times with my heart racing. Was I really going to do this? Would it destroy my relationship with my son forever? But each time, I remembered Vanessa's smirking face, her casual cruelty, and my resolve hardened. Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, with a light dusting of snow that made the world look like it had been sprinkled with powdered sugar. I dressed quietly in the dark, zipped my suitcase, and carried it to the front door. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Richard's pride and joy, now relegated to a corner because Vanessa thought it too old-fashioned. In the kitchen, I looked around one last time. The refrigerator was stocked with ingredients, the counter lined with mixing bowls and utensils, the dining room table already set with my grandmother's china and crystal glasses. Everything was prepared, except the cook had decided to quit without notice. I placed the card propped against the coffee maker, where Michael would find it first thing. Then I slipped on my coat, picked up my suitcase, and walked out of my own front door. Eleanor was waiting, her porch light a beacon in the pre-dawn darkness. Welcomed me with a warm hug and the promised hot chocolate, already spiked with schnapps despite the early hour. "Merry Christmas to us," she said, clinking her mug against mine. As the sun rose over the snowy landscape, I felt something unfamiliar blooming in my chest. Not guilt, not anxiety, but a quiet certainty that I had done the right thing. For once, I had chosen myself. Michael found my eye. Note at 8:17 a.m. I know the exact time because that's when my phone began to ring. I watched Eleanor's caller ID flash my son's name 5 times before I finally answered. "Mom? Where are you? What is this note?" His voice was pitched high with panic. I took a deep breath. "I'm safe, Michael. I'm with Eleanor." "With Eleanor?" "Mom, we have 25 people coming in less than 10 hours. What do you mean you need some space?" "Exactly what I wrote," I said calmly. I need space to remember who I am. I can't be Vanessa's unpaid caterer anymore. Is this some kind of joke? A power play? His voice cracked with disbelief. You've prepared for this dinner all week. I prepared because I didn't want to alert Vanessa to my plans, I explained. I didn't want a confrontation. I just wanted, to quietly step away. Step away? Now anger was creeping into his voice. You're abandoning us on Christmas Eve. Do you have any idea how this makes you look? How this makes us look? His words stung, but I held firm. Michael, I've spent 2 years being invisible in my own home. I've cooked, cleaned, and served without complaint while Vanessa took credit and treated me like the help. I've reached my limit. So this is about Vanessa? Mom, she's under a lot of pressure. This isn't about Vanessa, I interrupted. It's about me. About remembering that I deserve basic respect and consideration. In the background, I could hear Vanessa's voice rising in pitch and volume as Michael presumably explained the situation. Her words were muffled but clearly panicked. Mom, Michael's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. Please come home. We can talk about this tomorrow. Just help us get through tonight. For a moment, my resolve wavered. This was my son, my only child, pleading with me. But then I heard Vanessa's voice again, sharp with accusation. I told you she'd pull something like this. She's always been jealous of me. The absurdity of that statement, that I, who had given everything, could be jealous of someone who took everything, strengthened my determination. I'm sorry, Michael, I said. But no, I won't be coming back today. Vanessa wanted to host this dinner. Let her host it. Mom, please. Merry Christmas, Michael. I love you. My gift for you is under my bed. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not with fear or guilt. With liberation. Eleanor sat across from me at her small kitchen table, pretending not to eavesdrop while doing exactly that. Well? She asked when I set the phone down. It's done, I said. No going back now. She raised her coffee mug in a toast. To new beginnings. Throughout the day, my phone buzzed with texts and calls. Michael growing increasingly desperate. Vanessa swinging between rage and false concern about my mental health. I turned the phone off after noon and helped Eleanor prepare our own modest Christmas Eve dinner. A small roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Simple food, prepared with love and shared with genuine affection. Meanwhile, across town, I could imagine the panic unfolding in my kitchen. Vanessa would be opening refrigerator doors, staring at raw ingredients with increasing horror. Michael would be making frantic phone calls to local restaurants, only to discover that on Christmas Eve, no one could accommodate a last-minute order for 25 people. By 5:00 p.m., when guests were due to arrive, I pictured Vanessa's perfect makeup beginning to crack along with her composure. The table would be set beautifully, that much I had done, but it would remain empty as the doorbell rang and the first guests arrived. I didn't need to imagine what happened next because Sarah Jenkins' daughter, Lily, worked at the local pizza place and filled in the details the next day. According to Lily, they received a panicked order at 5:45 p.m. from my address. 12 large pizzas with various toppings, to be delivered as soon as humanly possible. When the delivery driver arrived, he found a house full of well-dressed people awkwardly holding empty cocktail glasses, while Vanessa, her face flushed with humiliation, tried to explain why dinner was running a bit behind schedule. Mayor Wilson's wife, always quick with a cutting remark disguised as concern, apparently asked loud enough for everyone to hear. But didn't you say your mother-in-law had been cooking for days? I was so looking forward to meeting this culinary genius. Vanessa's stammered explanation, that I had fallen ill suddenly, might have been believable if not for Dr. Claire Richardson, who had seen me that very morning at the grocery store, looking perfectly healthy as I bought ingredients for Eleanor's and my dinner. That's odd, Dr. Richardson remarked. She seemed fine when I complimented her on her cookie recipe this morning. She even mentioned how excited she was to spend Christmas with her dear friend Eleanor instead of, how did she put it, playing caterer to people who don't know she exists. A hush fell over the gathering as Vanessa's lie unraveled. The pizzas arrived to save her from immediate response, but the damage was done. As guests awkwardly balanced paper plates with pizza slices on their laps, the whispered conversations throughout the house were not about hospital politics or country club gossip, but about the absent mother-in-law who had finally reached her breaking point. By 8 p.m., most guests had made polite excuses and departed, leaving behind half-eaten pizzas and the lingering scent of social disaster. The Christmas Eve feast that was supposed to cement Vanessa's status as the town's preeminent hostess had instead become the night everyone would remember as the pizza party that exposed the truth. Eleanor and I sat by her fireplace that evening, sipping wine and watching the Christmas lights twinkle on her small tree. I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure in knowing Vanessa's plans had collapsed. Instead, I felt something much rarer and more precious. Peace. You know he'll be angry for a while, Eleanor said, breaking our comfortable silence. Michael? Yes, I expect so. I watched the flames dance in the fireplace. But maybe it's time he faced some uncomfortable truths about his marriage, about how he's allowed Vanessa to treat me. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. Mothers and sons. It's complicated. You've spent your whole life protecting him, Maggie. Maybe it's time to let him feel the consequences of his choices. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes swirling in the glow of the streetlights. Christmas carols played softly from Eleanor's old record player. For the first time in years, I felt the true spirit of the holiday. Not the frantic perfection, Vanessa, chaste, but the quiet joy of being with someone who truly saw and valued me. My phone remained off, a silent testament to my newfound boundaries. Tomorrow would bring confrontations and difficult conversations, but tonight was for healing, for remembering that I was more than someone's mother, more than an unpaid servant, more than a convenient backdrop for someone else's life. Tonight, I reclaimed Margaret Coleman. Christmas morning dawned with a pristine blanket of snow covering Eleanor's neighborhood. We woke early, like children eager for presents, though our excitement stemmed more from the simple joy of having nowhere to be and nothing expected of us. Coffee first or presents first? Eleanor asked, her silver hair sticking up in all directions. Coffee, I answered, definitively. I'm not functional enough for emotional responses yet. We padded to the kitchen in our slippers and robes, the hardwood floors cold beneath our feet. Eleanor's apartment was small but cozy, filled with treasures from a well-lived life, books with cracked spines, photographs of her children and grandchildren scattered around the country, pottery she'd made in retirement classes. It felt like a home, not a showroom. As the coffee brewed, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma, I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately buzzed with notifications. 12 missed calls from Michael, 5 from Vanessa, and numerous text messages ranging from pleading to accusatory. The most recent text from Michael, sent just an hour ago, was simple. Mom, we need to talk. Please call me when you're ready. No anger, no demands. Just a request. It was a start. Eleanor set a steaming mug in front of me and peered over my shoulder at the phone. Going to call him back? Not yet, I said, setting the phone aside. It's Christmas morning. I'm going to enjoy it first. We exchanged small gifts. A hand-knitted scarf from Eleanor to me, a collection of rare teas from me to her, and 8 cinnamon rolls that Eleanor had prepared the day before. The simple pleasure of friendship without obligation felt like the greatest gift of all. Around noon, my phone rang again. Michael. This time I answered. Merry Christmas, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Mom. His voice sounded tired, strained. Can I come see you? Alone, he added quickly. I glanced at Eleanor, who nodded, encouragingly. Yes, Eleanor's apartment. Do you remember the address? Lakeview Terrace, Building C, Apartment 302, he recited. I'll be there in 30 minutes. After hanging up, I showered and dressed carefully in a soft blue sweater that Richard had always said brought out my eyes. Not for vanity's sake, but as armor. I needed to feel like myself for this conversation. When the doorbell rang, Eleanor squeezed my hand. I'll make myself scarce. Call if you need reinforcements. She slipped into her bedroom, closing the door discreetly. Michael stood in the hallway, looking rumpled and exhausted, holding a small wrapped package. The sight of him, my son, my heart, made my resolve waver for a moment. But I straightened my shoulders and invited him in. Nice place, he said, awkwardly, glancing around. Cozy. Eleanor has always had good taste, I replied. Have a seat. We sat across from each other, the coffee table between us like neutral territory. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The Christmas tree lights blinked softly in the corner, casting colored shadows across his familiar face. You left, he finally said. Not an accusation, just a statement of fact. I did. Why didn't you tell me how unhappy you were? Why just disappear? I considered my words carefully. Would you have listened, Michael? Really listened? Every time I've tried to express discomfort with how Vanessa treats me, you've dismissed it. That's just her way. She doesn't mean anything by it. Do it for peace. He flinched slightly at hearing his own words repeated back to him. I didn't disappear to hurt you, I continued. I left because staying would have hurt me more. I've spent 2 years shrinking myself to fit into the corners of my own home. It's your house, he said quietly. You could have asked us to leave. And lose you entirely? No. I was caught between my dignity and my love for you. Yesterday, I finally chose dignity. Michael ran a hand through his hair, that gesture so like his father's, and sighed deeply. The dinner was a disaster. Vanessa tried to pull it off, but it was obvious to everyone that something was wrong. Dr. Richardson asked me point blank if Vanessa had been mistreating you. A small part of me, the part still raw from months of humiliation, felt vindicated. But mostly I felt sad for my son caught in the middle of this mess. What did you tell him? I asked. The truth, that I hadn't been paying enough attention, that I'd failed you both. He looked down at his hands. After everyone left, Vanessa and I had the worst fight of our marriage. She blamed you for everything, called you manipulative, vindictive, jealous of her youth and success. I waited, letting him continue at his own pace. And for the first time, I really heard the contempt in her voice when she talked about you. Saw how she viewed you, not as family, not even as a person with feelings, but as a convenience, a tool. His voice cracked slightly. I'm so sorry, Mom. I let this happen. The apology I had waited so long to hear brought tears to my eyes, but I blinked them back. We both let it happen, Michael. I should have stood up for myself sooner. Why didn't you? Because mothers are supposed to sacrifice for their children. Because after your father died, making your life perfect became my mission. Because I thought loving someone meant putting their needs above your own. Always. I smiled sadly. I was wrong about that last part. Real love requires boundaries and respect. Michael nodded slowly. I brought you something. He handed me the small package he'd been holding. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a delicate silver frame containing a photograph I hadn't seen in years. Me at about 30, laughing in the backyard, my head thrown back in uninhibited joy. Richard had taken it during a summer barbecue. Dad always kept this in his wallet, Michael said softly. After he died, I found it and kept it. I thought you should have it back, to remind you of who you are when you're not taking care of everyone else. The photograph blurred as tears filled my eyes. I remembered that day, the feeling of being young and loved and fully alive. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that woman existed. Thank you, I whispered. What happens now? Michael asked, his voice uncertain. Will you come home? The question hung between us, weighted with complicated emotions. Home. Was it still my home, or had it become a place where I merely existed in the background of others' lives? I don't know yet, I answered honestly. I need time to think, to remember who I am outside of being your mother or Vanessa's convenient help. I need to feel like a person again, not a function. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. I understand. And Vanessa, that's between you and her. I said gently. I won't tell you what to do in your marriage, but I will tell you that I won't return to a situation where I'm disrespected in my own home. He stood, looking both older and somehow younger than when he had arrived. I should go. Vanessa's at her parents' house. We need space too, I guess. As I walked him to the door, he turned and hugged me suddenly, fiercely, the way he used to as a child. I love you, Mom. That never changed. I just forgot to show it. I love you too, I said, holding him tight for a moment before letting go. Always. After he left, Eleanor emerged from her bedroom, her eyes questioning. It was a start, I said simply. A good one. The week between Christmas and New Year's in our town has always had a dreamlike quality, a liminal space where normal routines are suspended and time seems to slow down. This year, that strange bubble of days took on new meaning for me as I adjusted to my temporary exile, and the ripples of my Christmas Eve departure spread through our close-knit community. Eleanor and I established a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were for coffee and reading by her bay window that overlooked the snow-covered park. Afternoons, we would bundle up and walk through town, sometimes stopping for lunch at Rosie's Diner or browsing the post-holiday sales. Evenings were for movies, board games, and occasionally a glass of wine or two that loosened our tongues and led to conversations deeper than we'd had in years. It was during one of these walks, 3 days after Christmas, that I realized just how quickly news had traveled. We were passing Anderson's pharmacy when Mrs. Anderson herself, a stout woman in her 70s who knew everyone's business and medical conditions with equal intimacy, bustled out the door and intercepted us. "Margaret Coleman," she exclaimed, as if spotting a celebrity. Was wondering when you'd show your face around town. Eleanor and I exchanged glances. Hello, Dorothy, I said cautiously. How was your Christmas? Oh, don't you hello, Dorothy me, she said, lowering her voice to a dramatic stage whisper. Everyone knows what happened. How you walked out on that daughter-in-law of yours right before her big fancy dinner. Left her high and dry with all those important people coming. I felt my face heat up, not with shame, but with the uncomfortable awareness of being the center of town gossip. Dorothy, I'm not sure that's entirely good for you, she interrupted, patting my arm with surprising force. That girl has been parading around town for 2 years acting like she owns the place, talking about you like you're her personal servant. About time. Someone showed her what's what. I blinked in surprise. Thank you? My nephew was there, you know. Works with your son at the hospital. Said they ended up eating pizza on those fancy plates of yours. She cackled with delight. Imagine! All that bragging about a gourmet Christmas feast and they got Domino's. Eleanor, sensing my discomfort, stepped in smoothly. Well, Dorothy, we're on our, way to lunch. Lovely to see you. As we walked away, Mrs. Anderson called after us. You hold your ground, Margaret. Half the town's talking about it, and they're all on your side. We hurried around the corner before I let out a long breath. Well, that was predictable, Eleanor finished. This is a small town, Maggie. Did you think people wouldn't notice when the hospital's rising stars, your surgeon and his social climbing wife had a Christmas Eve catastrophe? I didn't do it for attention, I said, feeling suddenly defensive. I didn't want to humiliate them publicly. I just needed to escape. Eleanor linked her arm through mine as we continued walking. Intent and impact are different things, my friend. You may not have meant to create a town scandal, but that's what happened. The question is, how do you feel about it? It was a good question, one I hadn't fully considered in the emotional aftermath of my decision. How did I feel about people knowing? About Vanessa's humiliation becoming public? About becoming, however temporarily, the talk of the town? Conflicted, I finally answered as we turned onto Main Street. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted recognition. To be seen as a person with feelings and limits. Well, Eleanor said dryly, you've certainly been seen now. Our conversation was interrupted by the sight of Claire Richardson emerging from the bookstore ahead. Dr. Claire, as most people called her, was not only a respected physician, but also one of the few people in town who had consistently treated me with genuine warmth whenever our paths crossed at hospital functions. Unlike Mrs. Anderson, she approached us with quiet dignity, her intelligent eyes crinkling with a gentle smile. Margaret, Eleanor, happy holidays. Claire, I nodded, bracing myself for another reference to Christmas Eve. I was hoping to run into you, she said, surprising me with her directness. Would you have time for coffee sometime this week? I'd love to, catch up. The invitation caught me off guard. Claire and I had always been friendly, but never friends who caught up over coffee. That would be lovely, I found myself saying. Wonderful. Friday morning at Perks? Around 10? We confirmed the details, and she continued on her way with a graceful wave. Eleanor gave me a speculative look as we resumed walking. What? I asked. Nothing, she said innocently. Just interesting how people are seeing you differently now. What do you mean? Before, you were Michael's mom or Vanessa's mother-in-law. Now you're Margaret Coleman, the woman who stood up for herself in spectacular fashion. People are curious about you. The idea was both flattering and unsettling. Had I really been so invisible before? Had my identity been so completely subsumed by my relationships to others? Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Can we talk? Things with V getting complicated. Need advice. I stared at the message for a long moment. He needed me. My son. My heart. The instinct to drop everything and rush to his side was powerful, ingrained by decades of motherhood. But something stopped me from immediately responding. What is it? Eleanor asked, noticing my expression as she set a cup of tea beside me. I showed her the text. He needs advice about Vanessa. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. And you're hesitating because I'm not sure I'm the right person to advise him about his marriage to a woman who treated me like staff, I said slowly, articulating the thought as it formed. Because I'm still figuring out my own boundaries. Because maybe, just maybe, he needs to work through this without me smoothing the path. Eleanor smiled, a proud, knowing smile. Well, well, well. Look who's growing a shiny new backbone. I typed a careful response. I'm here if you need to talk, but relationship advice might be better from a neutral third party. Have you considered talking to Dr. Brennan at the hospital? Sending love. Setting the phone down felt like another small victory, another step toward the woman in the photograph Michael had given me, the one who knew how to exist as herself, not just in service to others. That night, I dreamed of Richard. We were sitting on our back porch watching fireflies rise from the summer grass. His hand was warm in mine, solid in that impossible dream way that makes you forget, momentarily, about death and separation. "You did good, Maggie," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered it. "Took you long enough." "I was trying to be strong," I told him. "There's a difference between being strong and being a doormat," he replied, his eyes crinkling with the smile I had fallen in love with 30 years ago. "You were always the strongest person I knew, too. Strong to let people walk all over you. I miss you," I said, leaning against his shoulder. "Everything got harder without you. And yet, here you are, still standing, still finding your way." He squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Margaret Coleman." I woke with tears on my cheeks but a sense of peace in my heart. Whether the dream was my subconscious processing or something more spiritual, didn't matter. The message was what I needed to hear. January arrived with a crystalline chill, the kind that makes your breath visible in small, disappearing clouds. The new year brought with it a sense of possibility that I hadn't felt in decades. My coffee with Claire Richardson had turned into lunch, which had turned into regular walks through the snow-covered park. She was intelligent, kind, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and experiences, not as Michael's mother or Vanessa's mother-in-law, but as Margaret. "I've always admired you," she admitted during one of our walks, her cheeks pink from the cold. "The way you raised Michael on your own, built a career in nursing, maintained your dignity through everything." My dignity wasn't exactly on display when I abandoned Christmas. "Dinner," I pointed out. Claire laughed, the sound bright in the winter air. "That's where you're wrong. There's nothing more dignified than knowing your own worth and refusing to be treated as less." On January 10th, 2 weeks after my impromptu departure, Michael called to ask if we could meet again. This time, he suggested Neutral Ground, the small cafe on Main Street where we used to have breakfast when he was in medical school. I arrived early, ordering a chai latte and claiming a quiet corner table. When Michael walked in, I was struck by how different he looked. More centered somehow, though still carrying the weight of complicated emotions. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." "About?" "Everything. My marriage, our family, the kind of man I want to be." He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, seeming to draw strength from its warmth. "Vanessa and I have decided to separate. Though I'd suspected this might be coming, hearing it stated so plainly still took me by surprise." "I'm sorry, Michael. I never wanted to cause problems in your marriage." "You didn't cause this, Mom," he said firmly. "You just exposed what was already broken. After Christmas, when the dust settled, we had some hard conversations. Really hard ones." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Vanessa admitted she never saw our living arrangement as temporary. She liked having control over the house, liked having you there to handle everything while she built her social status." "And you?" I asked gently. I was, comfortable. It was easier to let things continue than to face the truth. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me with renewed determination. "But I don't want easy anymore. I want right." The honesty between us felt like a fresh start, a clearing away of old pretenses and accommodations. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked. About disappointments and hopes, about Richard's memory and Michael's future, about what family should mean. "I found an apartment," he told me as our conversation wound down. "Just a temporary place while I figure things out. Vanessa's staying with her parents for now." "And the house?" I asked, thinking of my home of 30 years, now filled with Vanessa's modern furniture and sterile decor. "It's your house, Mom, always has been. I was hoping maybe you'd want to come home?" The question caught me off guard. Home. The word carried such complicated emotions now. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It doesn't feel like mine anymore." Michael nodded, understanding. "Whatever you decide, I support you. And if you want to make it yours again, I'll help." That evening, I sat in Eleanor's living room, turning over the conversation with Michael in my mind. "He wants me to come back to the house," I told her. "And do you want to?" Eleanor asked, setting aside her crossword puzzle. "I'm not sure." I stared out the window at the streetlights glowing in the early darkness. It's where Michael grew up, where Richard and I built our life, but it also became a place where I felt invisible. Places aren't just walls and roofs, Maggie. They're filled with whatever energy we bring to them. Eleanor's eyes, wise with age and experience, met mine. Maybe the question isn't whether you want to go back to that house, but whether you want to go forward in it, on your own terms. Her words stayed with me as I lay awake that night. Could I reclaim my home, not as it was, a shrine to memories and obligations, but as something new? A space that reflected who I was becoming, not just who I had been? The next morning, I called Claire and asked for her help with something important. By afternoon, we were standing in my empty house, the January sunlight streaming through windows that needed washing. It feels smaller, I said, moving through the living room where Vanessa's designer furniture had been removed, leaving only the imprints on the carpet. That happens when the emotional weight lifts, Claire observed. She moved to the center of the room, turning slowly. So much potential here. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, I said slowly, that I've spent too long living in the past. Richard would want me to create something new. Over the next 2 weeks, with Claire and Eleanor's encouragement and Michael's help. On weekends, I transformed the house. We painted the living room walls a warm terracotta instead of Vanessa's stark white. I reclaimed the spare bedroom as a reading nook, with bookshelves built by a local carpenter and a comfortable window seat overlooking the garden. The kitchen, my kitchen, was restored with my favorite cookware displayed proudly instead of hidden away in cabinets. Importantly, I hung photographs that told the story of my life, not just as a mother or wife, but as a complete person. There I was at 25, hiking the Appalachian Trail. There I was receiving my nursing certification. There I was with Eleanor at the beach last summer, both of us laughing into the wind. When Michael came to help me move my things from Eleanor's apartment back to the house, he paused in the hallway, staring at the photographs. I've never seen some of these before, he said, studying a picture of me from before he was born, sitting on a motorcycle behind a young Richard. There are a lot of things you don't know about your mother, I replied with a small smile. He looked at me with new eyes, not just his mother, but a woman with a history, with dreams and adventures of her own. I'd like to learn, he said softly. As January turned to February, my life settled into new rhythms. I volunteered 3 days a week at the hospital, using my nursing background to comfort patients and families in the waiting room. I joined Eleanor's book club. I had lunch with Claire every Thursday. And one evening, as I was planting flower bulbs in pots for my windowsill, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Vanessa standing on the porch, looking smaller somehow without her usual armor of perfect makeup and designer clothes. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. "Of course." She entered cautiously, her eyes widening as she took in the changes to the house. "It looks different. Nice," she added quickly. "Thank you," I said simply, leading her to the kitchen where I'd been making tea. "Would you like some?" She nodded, perching awkwardly on a stool at the counter, the same counter where she had delivered her Christmas demands just weeks before. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, filled with complicated history. "I owe you an apology," she finally said, the words sounding rehearsed but sincere. "I treated you terribly, took advantage of your kindness, used you to make myself look better." I stirred honey into my tea, giving myself time to respond thoughtfully. "Yes, you did." She blinked, perhaps surprised by my direct agreement. I thought you would be angrier." "I was angry," I admitted, "but anger is exhausting to maintain. And ultimately what happened led me here, to a place where I'm happier and more myself than I've been in years. So in a strange way, I should thank you." Vanessa's carefully composed expression cracked, and I glimpsed the insecurity beneath her polished exterior. "Michael and I are getting divorced," she said, her voice small. "I know. I'm sorry it came to that." "Are you?" She looked up, searching my face. Most mothers-in-law would be celebrating. I never wanted Michael to be unhappy. And despite everything, I don't want that for you either. A tear slipped down her cheek, which she quickly brushed away. "How are you so good? After everything I did?" I considered this question carefully. It's not about being good, Vanessa. It's about choosing who I want to be, regardless of how others treat me. I choose not to let resentment define me. She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "I don't know how to be different. I've always thought I needed to climb over people to get ahead." "You can learn," I said gently. "We all can." When she left an hour later, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take time, but understanding. We had seen each other as real people, perhaps for the first time. As I closed the door behind her, I felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. I had reclaimed not just my home and my identity, but also my capacity for compassion without self-sacrifice. Spring was still months away, but in my heart, new growth had already begun. The seasons turned with quiet certainty, winter softening into spring, spring blooming into summer. By December, almost a year after my Christmas Eve departure, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. My house truly felt like mine again, warm, lived in, and reflective of who I was. The garden flourished under my renewed attention, with perennials I'd planted in spring now established and hardy. Inside, every room had been reclaimed, repainted, or repurposed to suit my present, rather than preserve my past. Michael had settled into his new life as a single man, focusing on his medical career, and slowly, rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. We had dinner together every Sunday, sometimes joined by Eleanor or Claire. He called regularly, not out of obligation but genuine desire to connect. On his birthday in September, he had looked around the ya table at the small gathering of people who truly cared for him and said, "I think I finally understand what matters." Vanessa and I maintained a cordial distance. She had moved to the city for a marketing job, occasionally sending Michael updates that he would share with me. In her last email, she mentioned therapy and learning to build real relationships instead of social networks. It seemed, the Christmas Eve disaster had triggered growth for her as well. As the holiday season approached again, I found myself thinking about traditions, which to keep, which to let go, which to create anew. The previous Christmas had been a breaking point. This one, I decided, would be a celebration of how far we had all come. On the first day of December, I called Michael. "I'd like to host Christmas Eve dinner this year," I said. "A small gathering. You, Eleanor, Claire, a few others. Would you come?" "I'd love to," he answered without hesitation. "Can I help?" "Actually, yes. I'd like to cook together this time. Not as mother and son, but as two adults who both enjoy creating good food." He laughed, a free, easy sound that reminded me of the boy he had been. "Deal. But fair warning, my soufflés still collapse. We'll stick to less temperamental dishes," I promised. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, a gentle excitement built in me. This dinner would be different. Not a performance to impress, but a genuine sharing of food and fellowship. I invited Eleanor, of course, and Claire, whose friendship had deepened into something that made my heart feel young again. I included Dr. Richardson and his husband from the hospital, Mrs. Wilson, who lived next door, and two nurses I'd befriended through my volunteer work. A small, eclectic gathering, Eleanor observed when I shared the guest list. "People who see you for who you are." "Exactly," I agreed. "No pretense, no social climbing, just good company and honest conversation." On Christmas Eve morning, Michael arrived early, wearing jeans and a comfortable sweater, ready to cook. We moved around the kitchen with easy coordination, him chopping vegetables while I prepared the turkey, both of us sipping coffee and sharing stories. No pressure, no resentment, just the simple pleasure of creating something together. "Remember how Dad used to help in the kitchen?" Michael asked, laughing as he recalled Richard's well-intentioned but chaotic attempts at cooking. How could I forget? He once added salt instead of sugar to the pumpkin pies. We had to drive 20 miles to find an open bakery on Thanksgiving morning. These memories no longer carried the sharp edge of loss. Time had smoothed them into treasures we could hold lightly, share freely. By afternoon, delicious aromas filled the house. The table was all set simply but beautifully with my grandmother's linen tablecloth and candles in crystal holders. Fresh pine boughs and holly berries made a natural centerpiece, more elegant in their simplicity than any elaborate arrangement. At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Eleanor arrived first, bearing a bottle of wine and a warm hug. Claire followed shortly after, her eyes lighting up when she saw the transformation of the house, and perhaps of me. One by one, my guests arrived. There was laughter in the living room, genuine compliments about the food, conversations that flowed naturally from topic to topic. No one was performing, no one was keeping score. We were simply people enjoying each other's company on a winter evening. As we gathered around the table, Michael caught my eye from across the room and raised his glass slightly, a private toast between us. I nodded, acknowledging what didn't need to be said. How far we had come since last Christmas, how much we had both learned about ourselves and each other. When everyone was seated, I stood to welcome them. "Last year at this time," I began, my voice steady and clear, "I was learning a difficult but necessary lesson about, self-respect. This year, I'm grateful to share this table with people who value authentic connection over appearance, substance over status. I looked around at these faces. Some new friends, some old, all dear to me in different ways. In my family, we have a tradition of sharing one thing we're grateful for before we eat. I'll start. I'm grateful for second chances, for the opportunity to rebuild not just my home, but myself. Eleanor went next. I'm grateful for friends who show us who we really are, even when we've forgotten. Claire smiled, her hand briefly touching mine on the tablecloth. I'm grateful for unexpected beginnings, even later in life. When it came to Michael's turn, he cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. I'm grateful for my mother, who taught me that real strength isn't about power or control, but about knowing your own worth. His words brought tears to my eyes, happy ones, healing ones. As we passed dishes and broke bread together, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I had lost some things, illusions, false peace, a flawed marriage for my son, but I had gained so much more. Self-respect, genuine connections, and the knowledge that it's never too late to reclaim your life. The evening unfolded with warmth and genuine joy. We lingered over dessert and coffee, no one in a hurry to leave. When my guests finally departed, Michael stayed behind to help clean up. "This was perfect, Mom," he said as we washed dishes side by side. "Exactly what Christmas should be." "It was, wasn't it?" I agreed, passing him a plate to dry. Not because everything was flawless, but because it was real. After Michael left with a warm hug and promises to call tomorrow, I sat alone in my living room, watching the Christmas tree lights twinkle in the darkness. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the window in their silent, perfect dance. 1 year ago, I had walked away from humiliation and servitude, not knowing where that brave step would lead. Tonight, I sat in peaceful contentment, surrounded by the evidence of a life reclaimed and reimagined. The greatest gift I had given myself wasn't just the courage to leave that Christmas Eve. It was the wisdom to create something new from what remained, a life of dignity, authenticity, and joy. As I switched off the lights and headed to bed, I paused in the hallway to look at the photograph Michael had given me last Christmas, the one of me laughing in the backyard, head thrown back in uninhibited joy. For so long, I had thought of that woman as someone I used to be, a version of myself lost to time and circumstance. Now I recognized her as someone I had found again. I touched the frame lightly, a promise to myself. I see you now, and I won't lose sight of you again. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in clean, unmarked white, a perfect canvas for new beginnings.